This is Andie Burjek, Associate Editor at Workforce, and I am here with Sue Lamb. She is the Global Head of HR Diagnostics at Shell. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So she's been with Shell since 2015, and she leads a center of excellence that develops and implements global employee surveys, and she also has a history of HR best practices and benchmarking research. So you're the perfect person to talk to about HR analytics, and I'm really excited to see what you have to say.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. So my first question is, what makes you passionate about data analytics?
Yeah, so I think I have a personal connection to it, and it's going to sound completely nerdy, but growing up, I just always was wondering what made people tick. So why do people behave a certain way, which led me to study psychology. But then when I got into graduate school, I realized, like, wow, you can actually apply numbers and statistics to behavior. And so I thought that was just really exciting to balance the psychology with some of the math and science. And so that really led me down this path. And then when I found out that I could actually use it to help improve people's lives in the workplace, that just really sealed the deal for me.
Fantastic. So when you studied this, did you always know that you wanted to go into the business space, to this HR world?
That's actually a really good question. I would say that I'm what you would call a fallen academic. So I was actually supposed to be a professor after I got out of graduate school, but I realized that the work that I was doing wasn't exactly being applied as much as I wanted it to. So I actually left graduate school, left my job offers, and decided I'm just going to see what else I can do. And actually that's where I found HR. And so I didn't plan on going into this field. I didn't know anything about it, but once I got into it, I realized that I could make a difference in the field.
Fantastic. And what specific, behaviors from employees or the workforce are you especially interested in as somebody in HR diagnostics?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different behaviors that we're interested in. So leadership is one. Two, we are always interested in what makes people engaged in their work, what makes them enjoy their work and feel control over it. Generally speaking, I think I'm just interested in any organizational behavior that helps to drive business performance. So anything that can make people feel like happy and enjoy their work is always a good thing. And then if it can also help companies, that's a win-win.
Fantastic. And employee engagement is one of those topics in HR that everybody's talking about now. Mm-hmm. So it must be really fascinating looking at that data and being able to make these connections about how to drive engagement. Is that difficult to look at that data and figure out what it actually means?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So usually what we typically do is when we look at a project, we will usually look at the scientific literature to see what's already been done first, and then to also talk to other companies that have already done this type of work, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we do want to get some insights from it. And so there's a rich research on employee engagement, so we look there first, and then that helped to drive the type of work that we're doing internally. And so at Shell, we've actually found that engagement drives performance, and then the key driver of engagement is actually our leaders. And so we've used this type of model to help improve engagement in the organization.
Fantastic. And when you do this outside research, what specific sources of research do you look for? What is, the gold standard of this is research that I can trust in for my HR department, and this is the type of takeaways that I know that I can trust?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So typically I will look, and my team will also look at the scientific literature, so things like peer-reviewed journals. And then some consultancies also have some great white papers out there as well, and so we'll look into them and see how they conducted the research and work. But actually what I really like to do is to learn from peer companies, so people in other industries as well, and see what they've actually done, because a lot of times what's worked for them may also work for us, but we always need to keep the business and the industry context in mind.
Fantastic. And then at you've been at Shell for about 3 years, right? At Shell, what are some of the major wins that you've had because of data analytics?
Sure. The first thing that I'll mention is that project on employee engagement and performance. So what we actually found was that employee engagement drives safety performance. Now at Shell, we are very much in tune with safety, and safety is something that's really important to us. So we want to make sure that anybody who works at Shell goes home safely to their family and to their friends. And so what we found in that project was that employee engagement actually drives safety performance. So higher performance meant lower safety incidents, and so that was a really big win for us. And then recently we also did another project where we looked at sales performance, and so what we found in that project was we could improve sales performance, for teams that actually had better sales performance. It was because they had team leaders who gave better coaching and also better feedback to their teams. And so we were able to use those types of insights and change their training and the recruitment efforts so that we could bolster this piece.
Fantastic. And obviously you have all this experience in data analytics, but certain HR companies, whether it's because they just don't have the technology yet or because they're just getting started, maybe their data analytics is this big thing with all these numbers, and what can you possibly do with this? So I guess what advice would you give to HR people who are kind of just starting to ramp up using data analytics at their organization?
Sure, that's actually a question that I get all the time because we're at a really large company right now, but there are some people who have 100 people at their company or 200. So I would say a couple of things there. The first is clean your data, and so making sure that all the data in your HRIS system is clean. That's actually very important. The second is to start small. So there are so many projects that you could do, but I would say start with a small project so you can show the value back to the business. But in the same vein, also pick a project that your business cares about. So if your business is struggling with sales, for example, focus on something related to that so that you can see what behavioral characteristics can help to improve sales performance. But if it's something else that your business cares about, focus on that. So one of my previous bosses said, follow the money, and so with our projects we try to do that so we have the maximum impact back to our business, but then also we're improving the lives of our employees.
Fantastic, that's really good advice. And how do you begin to get this data for your analytics function?
Yeah, so a lot of times we already have the data in our HRIS system, so most HR areas will already have that. But if there's anything that we need to collect, like survey data or assessment data, then we will usually build it ourselves, or we'll use a vendor maybe here, in order to collect that data. So there are a couple different ways you can do it.
Fantastic. And for organizations who maybe don't have the expertise in-house to run a whole data analytics function, do you think it's the role of HR to be in charge of that? Do you think that organizations will eventually need to hire a person who's solely focused on that? Do you have any thoughts on just like the future of this function and who's in charge of it? Is it always going to be HR?
Sure. I think it really depends on the organization. So it can be owned by HR or might be owned by the business. For us, it makes sense for it to be owned by HR because we do have a seat at the strategic planning table. But I think it really depends. I think wherever the interest lies, then it should start there. And if it's in HR, great. If it's in the business, that's also fine. It really depends on the company.